which is the three of us automatically.
Okay. Oh wow.
And we're live. And our friend Ellis just knocked his camera over, but we'll let him slide there. How you doing today, Joey? Oh, wait a minute. I
Oops,
can't hear
sorry.
you now. There you go.
Sorry, I was on mute. Better than I deserve.
Hey, amen. Hey, brother, welcome to the show. Joey, introduce our guest and our topic today, and we'll go from
Yes.
there.
So this is Ellis. He's one of our friends from the DW Friends community over on Twitter. We have fun talking about politics. I would say, and this is we're going to get into in the show is like we agree very closely on values. And sometimes in politics on the right, we like to have our fun, making our movement better and sharpening like iron sharpens iron. But the reason why I wanted to have Ellis on is because a couple of weeks ago he was posting about a protest he got involved with on behalf of Amos Miller. I believe I'm getting his name right. And I this story really stuck out to me because I grew up around the Amish. Right, I've seen Amish communities my whole life. I see them as a faithful, hardworking, religious minority. And so when I see the state picking on them, that rubs me the wrong way.
So, Ellis, tell us a little bit about yourself. I think he might be frozen there. Let's go here for a bit until we get him back on air. So let's show while we wait for Ellis to get his technical issues resolved. Let's show this little clip as to what this protest is all about. Give me 1 second. Of course, today we have technical issues. Drama, I tell you. Here he is. Let me get him back on there. There we go. How you doing, Ellis,
Is that
today?
better? Okay, cool. Yeah, it was super laggy. I'm good. How are you guys? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. Tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, why'd you get involved in this protest, and then we'll show a little clip, a news clip about what the protest was about.
Okay, cool. So I got involved in politics. I started educating myself, I would say 2017, 2018. And then really, I've always been on Twitter, but I never really posted. I started posting, I would say, like late September, early October of last year. And I got involved with Scott Pressler in December of last year, and have since done three gun shows. And I actually headed up the Amish protest on behalf of Scott Pressler.
Wow. So you headed it up.
Well, I didn't. I headed up his efforts for the protest, not the actual protest itself.
Okay, yeah, I got you. So let's watch this video and then we'll take it from there. Give me a second. Let me get you on the screen and then we'll play this here.
Dairy farmers asking a judge to allow them to sell raw milk outside Pennsylvania. Last week, as you may remember, state officials said Miller's Organic Farm in Burdenhand, Lancaster County, violated state law by selling raw milk, and indeed, 2 minors got sick with E. coli. Well, the state is allowing Miller to give raw milk only to immediate family members. Miller's is now asking if they can sell raw milk outside the state. The answer will likely be no, because the federal government banned interstate sales of raw milk in 1987. Some people believe raw milk is healthier than pasteurized milk.
So let me ask you the first question. What is the nature of the protest? Like, what exactly are they asking
So the
for?
nature of the protest, it just Oh no, I'm having connection issues again.
No, no, no. We can hear you. Is it
Can
lagging
you
a
hear you?
little?
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, it's fine. So the nature of the protest kind of goes back a couple years. The Pennsylvania Food Administration basically came to them and told him that he wasn't allowed to sell raw milk or self butchered animals, that they want everything to be tested and sent to the USDA or whoever, certified um, government agencies to make sure that it's going through what they believe are the proper channels.
Okay. And so are they, because I'm new to this, just hearing it for the first time, Joey brought it to my attention. Are they claiming this wanting to be an exemption based on religious liberty, or are they claiming it on just other factors?
So they're basically saying that because the state is basically saying they don't have a right to produce these raw materials and sell it on their own. It's not necessarily strictly religious based, but obviously the Amish are a religious people who believe in raw milk and organic farm to table
Hmm.
meat.
Okay. Joey, jump in here.
Yeah, so I don't actually think this is strictly a religious liberty case. I think the fact that the Amish are a religious minority, I think that goes to why the state has such an issue, right? In other words, I actually think the issue is actually about much more than simply the religious liberty part. In the sense that, listen, we used to live in it like 100 years ago, right? We used to be like we weren't so bogged down by regulations, right? Where every aspect of our life, right, where we had to have everything regulated, we couldn't make any decisions on our own, right? And so, and I think in 2020, right, this is where I really started getting woke up to the corruption of like the public health um, apparatus in this country, where it's like it's not about health, right? As I was actually talking with Gio a little bit before this, it's like, listen, I've had some insider experience with the dairy industry, and I promise you, plenty of the milk that you purchase at the store, it's loaded full of growth hormones, it's loaded full of antibiotics, right? And listen, if you want to buy that, if you think that's better, I think you should be free to buy that, buy store bought milk, right? And now, if Amos Miller, right, if he were selling his raw milk and claiming it was, pasteurized or something, right, then okay, I could see the state having a problem. But I think consumers should be allowed to willfully know what they're buying and purchase it. I just don't think that's something where the state needs to crack down on this group of this religious minority. Um, because, and here's the thing, and this is where I do think it's again a religious liberty issue, because these people do believe, like, in other words, their lifestyle, the reason they live it is for religious reasons, and they support it by selling their farm goods, by selling their, various woodworking and stuff. So this is part of supporting their community and their religious way of life.
What would you say, Ellis, to somebody who says, though, that the state may have a compelling interest to protect the public safety of people? They did mention in that newscast that two children got E. coli, and I think somewhere else in the article it mentioned that two kids did die. So, how would you answer that in this case?
So what I would say kind of goes back to what Joey says. It's like the right to try, the right to buy. None of these
Mhm.
people were going to Amos Miller's farm looking to buy something that they didn't already know and sign up to buy. So basically, in order to purchase any of his goods, they had to sign like a membership waiver saying they understood what they were buying and that they were there to buy that specific product. These are people from out of state, in state. Everybody who purchased his products all signed. It was they made it a membership instead of a disclaimer or whatever. So part of it is the commerce in and out of the state that the state has an issue with, and part of it is just the actual selling of the product. So what kind of started the whole thing was during COVID, it was more expensive for them to send cows to the USDA, and because the USDA was so backed up, all of the USDA processing facilities were so backed up, the Amish started processing their own meat. Once the Amish started processing their own meat, originally they kept all of the sales, either to immediate family or, within the Amish community. People started to see that there was also Amish butchered meat in the farmer stores or whatever you want to call them. So they then wanted to start purchasing that meat. And, that kept the government out of the whole situation. And then that's also kind of what brought the government into the situation. There was over 400 signed affidavits on behalf of Amos Miller during his testimony and the whole trial and everything. And they were all from customers that had said, we've all been consuming his products and we've never had an issue. And I believe during the trial, they Amos Amos's attorneys made the argument that while yes, they may have found stuff in what they claim to have been purchased from Amos, they never found any of that on Amos's farm. It was all post being purchased.
Okay. Okay. Joey, your thoughts?
Yeah. So, and again, this is gonna come through, and my lens coming through this is the fact that I am cynical, to say the best, that these people actually care about public health, right? Because, in other words, there
Okay,
are.
okay. So let me stop you right there real quick. Then what do you think the government is claiming? And then what do you think is actually behind it?
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I think what we saw in that, with those reporters, right? I think that's their claim. Their claim is their cl- their claim, or the reason why they're saying they're doing this, is in the name of public health. Um, and here's the thing: will I deny that there are some risks from small farm products? There can be. Um, but guess what? There's risks with the commercial farm products as well, right? I mean, I would argue, right, and obviously, we have a chronic health problem in America, right? I realize the way you do it, right, is, I mean, you kind of like the healthiest person I've ever met, Gio, right? And plant based. But listen, there is a chronic health problem that, even aside from various lifestyle choices, right? We have unfettered fast food, right? You never hear the public health establishment talking about that. They never talk about again, the growth hormones and whatnot that are in commercial products. And the reason why Amos has a non-Amish customer base is because there are people who woke up, I think a lot of them in the COVID era, who said, like, listen, I want to start making different choices. I want to be more natural. And listen, I think that's something that Americans should have the right to do. And I think there's part of our psyche today has been conditioned to think that the regulatory state is normal. And so when we see these stories, we just assume, oh, well, they've got to be right. It's like, I don't know. I think if people want to try living an alternative lifestyle, I think they should. And actually, I think the conversation we should be having, right, what we should be learning from the Amish, is maybe getting more people to be self-sufficient and have small hobby farms and whatnot.
Alice, before I throw it back to you, I do want to show you this. So tell us about this photo. When was this, and what are your thoughts on both of the things, the open
So
border stuff and all that? Go ahead.
This was actually at the courthouse for Amos. I would say there was probably between 350 and 400 people that showed up. It was in the middle of the week on a Thursday, and the only place you could stand was on the sidewalk right outside the courthouse. So I mean, it was a pretty busy event for being on a Thursday in the middle of the day. So we had a table set up to register people to vote. And then so I made signs. My wife also helped me, and I will give her a shout out because she is currently putting the girls to sleep by herself. So shout out to my wife. So we have done a couple events trying to reach out to the Amish. And just letting them know there are 80,000 Amish in Pennsylvania. There was no state, local, federal election that was won by more than 80,000 votes. So, where the Amish live, if they choose to, take control of, not necessarily take control of the government, but, they take control and they all vote, they can basically, decide which way Pennsylvania goes in this election. So we're trying to just open their eyes to that. So we are trying out different signs, seeing what comes across to people. The rebellion to tyranny is obedience to God. One really hit with a lot of them being religious people, a lot of the crowd as well. And then the open farms closes the border. That's just more sentiment towards, the Amish are a pacifist group. It's a closed society. They're not harming anybody. Why are we going after, using taxpayer money to go after the Amish when we have, fentanyl coming across the border, millions of people coming across the border who, are bringing, there's been measles outbreaks now, these are real things that, we could actually be taking action against, but instead, we're shutting down Amish farms. So
One day
this,
we should have a discussion, Joey, and maybe Alice can join us as well and others about the border. Because I know more about the border than I do about this situation, which is why I'm curious and I'm probing here a little bit. Tell us a little bit about this picture you got going here. What you got going
So
here?
this is yeah, this is directly in front of the courthouse. I believe that there was a couple speakers that just kind of stood up, and there was an Amish farm there. Since Amos is no longer allowed to sell any of his products, he was there handing out raw milk and cheese. I partook in both. Both were absolutely delicious, and it was a cold and windy day, so a little bit of sustenance to get us through. And so they were just taking turns, just kind of standing up and telling the story of Amos kind of from the beginning and just the trials that he's gone through. He's been shut down several times. There was like a $250,000 fine that was levied against him.
Yeah.
Um, and so what this trial or this hearing was for was an injunction that was against Amos, which he subsequently lost. But basically, the argument was, if he's shut down, he is going to be, out of business in a month or two. It doesn't really give him any avenue for victory because by the time that everything, comes to fruition, he'll have already been out of business. And luckily there's a GoFundMe that people have been very generous in helping him raise money to keep his farm open. But
Can you
it
mention it?
just
Do you know it? I mean, because
I don't
go
know it off
ahead
the
and
top of my head.
okay. Well, if you get it to us after the
Yeah,
show, we'll put
absolutely.
it in the description. And if people want to donate, I look, as Joey said, alluded to about my health, I'm 100% plant-based. I used to eat
Cool.
meat over 2 decades ago, but I don't think I've ever had raw milk. And so, tell us for the listening audience or video audience or whatever, what's the difference between, like, let's say, milk you buy at the store and raw milk, as far as taste, texture, all of that?
So the taste, I mean, it's like drinking a milkshake. Honestly, you wouldn't want to
Thick.
drink a lot of it because it's definitely a little bit heavier than regular milk. Because by the time you get your 2%, even whole milk, a lot has been taken out of it. A lot, it's been pasteurized. It's gone through all of these processes instead of getting it from the animal in which is was intended, which is what the Amish argument is. This is straight from an animal that they raise themselves, that they care for. So you're not going to get all of the hormones. You're not going to get all of the 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 pesticides sprayed on the food that they eat. It's honestly just farm to table, good, wholesome food.
Okay, all right. So you're saying it's thicker, like a milkshake?
It's definitely thicker, that's for sure. Because
Okay.
I don't
Would it
think
Is
that
that
they
compare
take
to
the creams
yogurt?
out of it.
Would it
It's
compare
not
to
quite as thick
yogurt?
as it's maybe like more like if you've ever had like a drinkable yogurt, slightly thinner than that. But I mean, it's the real deal. It's pretty thick stuff, that's for sure.
And does it? I could imagine that the taste changes,
Oh,
because of the thickness.
So it's like if you just had heavy whipping cream and milk and you mixed it together, it's a little bit more sweet.
Hmm.
It just tastes like milk, like what you would think milk actually tastes like. You're like, oh my, like all of the milk flavor. It was, I had never had it before, honestly. And then when they started passing it around, I was like, oh, that's awesome. So I tasted it and I was like, I drank the whole thing. And yeah, it was delicious. The cheese was also very good and they were just cutting it fresh off the block right there.
So you mentioned about the injunction and the court date. Where are we with the legal matters at the moment? As of today, March 18th, where is the legal situation?
So the injunction was not lifted, but it was altered. So he can now feed his family with all of his stuff. Before, they had come to his farm and taken everything. So, that's his means of feeding his family, not only providing for his family, but literally his family's food. So he can now um, feed his own family, and then there will be in other hearings. This was basically just a plea from Amos's side to say, hey, like, while this is all being, litigated, let's, let this man continue on with his life and not presume guilt before innocence. So, on the day of the hearing, the judge didn't make a decision, which kind of led us all to believe where he was going to go with the decision, because there was all these peaceful, absolutely peaceful protesters outside. But just to keep everybody calm, they waited a day or two to come out with it, and then they unfortunately made that decision. But as long as he can feed his family, he's gonna keep fighting, and hopefully justice will prevail.
And when would be the next time for
I'm not
decision
sure.
or?
I'm not sure they've announced the next court date. Like, this injunction was
Mhm.
only announced a couple days before, so I think they're just waiting to kind of get on the docket, and it'll be within the next couple months, I believe.
Okay. Joey, you could jump in whatever you want, but let me ask one last question. H- How did you get involved? You personally.
So, November of last year, Scott Pressler had a post on X, a thread basically asking Ronna McDaniel to step down, and I just interacted with that post a couple times, and he sent me a DM on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, and was just like, "Hey, I appreciate your posts, and just want you to know that you've been seen." And then he had posted that he needed volunteers for a gun show in Philly, and I'm from Maryland, so it's about a 2 hour drive. So I just reached back out to him, was like, hey, I would love to come out and help. So that was in the beginning of December. We then did another gun show in Virginia in early January. And then mid January, we did the Harrisburg Outdoor Show, which is the largest outdoor show in the world. We
Hmm.
registered over the week, we registered over 300 people. And then Scott is a big believer in reaching out to coalitions that aren't really active: truckers, the Amish, people who are either away during election time, or the Amish who are they're pacifists by nature, so they don't really believe in getting involved. They just want to be left alone. So the plan is, listen, sometimes you have to make the government leave you alone. It's not necessarily, they're clearly not staying out of your business, and they're trying to come after your way of life. So we're not asking you guys to become political activists or anything. We just want you to vote to protect your rights, and that's kind of the whole idea behind it. We do mud sales, which are just like where the Amish sell all of their wares, the woodworking, animals,
Hmm.
eggs, milk, all of that. We do the Amish markets. So um, they are a stubborn people, I would say, and a lot of them. So we're working on just planting the seeds, and it's not, you're not going to change everybody's mind after one time meeting them. So we're just
Hmm.
really out to just show our support consistently, and being, hopefully being consistent with it will allow us to get across to them that's like, we're not just here trying to pull the wool over your eyes or whatever. We're here to try to inform you on what's going on in the whole country, whereas you guys might not see all of the stuff that's going on everywhere. Because if we could show them a couple videos, it would probably open their eyes a little bit. But since that's not really their cup of tea, just the continued support, I think has really started to open some people's eyes.
Okay,
Imagine
well,
if the Amish saw libs of TikTok's
Uh,
videos.
that's what, like, it would take 10 minutes. Like, just forgive the Lord, or have the Lord forgive you for 10 minutes. Like, let's just watch a couple videos and then we can talk.
welcome to the light. I have seen the light.
Yes.
Go
Yeah,
ahead, Joe.
so one thing I wanted to say is, so for me it was easy to get passionate about this story because, like I said, in the town where I lived, we have a Amish community. I've had plenty of experience. Right? We used to buy feed from an Amish store for our animals, and so like I had a personal experience with the Amish. Right, I live an hour from Shipshewana, Indiana, which is like a major kind of Amish town. Right, and so for me, it was easy to get passionate about it. But sometimes there can be people that just average, ordinary Americans who don't think about the Amish a lot, or when they do, they kind of think of it as like, weird or whatever. But the thing I would want to stress to people is like part of what makes America great is people of religious conviction. And we may not always agree on those religious convictions, but what we should agree on is that we should defend the right of people to have those religious convictions, right? I was thinking about it this way. Listen, I have very strong theological disagreements with Mormons, right? Latter Day Saints. But I think in a lot of ways, Mormons make this country better, right? The way that they are just passionate about sharing their faith, the way they are passionate about community outreach. And so I would go to bat to defend Mormons, right? Their right to practice their religion. Now, I would, maybe have some arguments with them, and I think our theological disagreements matter. But as long as we're protecting everyone's right to have them, that makes us a better country, right? Because then we can be inspired by people of religious conviction, right? We can learn from the Amish. We can say, like, listen, maybe we're not going to agree with them on everything, but there's something to a simpler life. And so I think as Americans, what we should all be able to rally behind is defending the personal conviction of particularly religious minorities because they're the ones who need us to speak up.
Look, and your comments about the Mormon, especially the Mormons and the Amish, yes, I would fight for their right to practice according to the liberties of their conscience because, they make good citizens. They're not out, vandalizing or promoting illicit drugs or things like that. So, yes, we should be able to fight for the religious liberty of everybody. And that's what this show is all about. And the Gio and Joey show is protecting people's rights, the liberty of conscience. But back to this Amish thing. In the ideal world, let's say the courts go for the argument of Miller and the people who support him. What are they looking to get out of this if it went 100% their way?
So basically, they're just looking to continue with what they've been doing for 100, 200, however many years the Amish have been there. What's really changed is that people outside the Amish community have opened their eyes to a simpler way of life, cleaner food, less processed food. And uh, part of the issue that the state has is that Amos wasn't registered to sell intercommerce, so people were they were originally going to a show in California, bringing stuff with them, an Amish show in California, and then that was frowned upon. So they don't even want people coming into Pennsylvania and then taking that stuff outside of the state line. So part of it is that the government wants their cut. Part of it is that the government just wants their hands and everything. Amos just wants to, sell his goods to people that want to buy them. And again, there was nobody who was an uninformed purchaser of his products. Everybody had to sign a membership form, and I met people who had anecdotal testimony, yes, but real testimony where they couldn't drink regular milk, and then they started buying Amos's products. They had no problem with it. They were having problems, gastrointestinal problems. They started buying food from Amish, or meat from Amish markets. That kind of stuff went away. So there are real people out there that feel that this food excuse me, um really has helped and benefited them in their lives and their health. So that's really just it's just the right to try and the right to buy. One of the other signs we had was, first Amos, then us. So it's, if they're gonna,
Hmm.
come after this peaceful pacifist farmer for simply selling his milk, eggs, meat, what's to stop them from coming after us for, our gas stoves, other ways of life that we have, that, if we don't stop it now, what's to come next is really the
All right,
bigger picture of everything.
okay, two-part question of that just to probe. Uh, what do you say to the fact, though, that the government does have a compelling interest for people, for public safety, which is legitimate? Now, they overstepped their bounds when it came to COVID. So that's one. And then the second one is, the article that Joey sent me alluded to that there were some unsanitary practices happening at the farm where they would put things down on the ground and then pick it up. What would you say to those two things? And then we're going to have a quote here by James Madison. Go ahead.
Yeah, so first I would just say, again, they're not uninformed customers. They're completely, aware of what they're buying. They know it hasn't gone through any of these processes. So, I understand if they like they have to sign a waiver, so it's, they're making an informed purchase. They're not somebody that's just coming off the street. Amos isn't telling anybody this is pasteurized milk. He's not telling, he's not selling anything under false pretense, essentially. So,
Hmm.
as an American, I feel like, if I can go and buy Cheetos, or I can go and buy, some of these other processed foods that have, 90% of it's not even real, why can I not buy something that's straight out of an animal?
Chicken
And
McNuggets, are they really food?
exactly, like, what is this even made out of? So, and then, personally, I don't necessarily buy that, there was unsanitary practices. I mean, and
Okay.
I would be hard pressed to think that there's not unsanitary practices in, I've seen videos where at chicken farms,
Commercial
there's
farms, yeah.
10,000 chickens, in a 100 square foot space. How sanitary can that be?
Feedlot.
And they're all pumped full of hormones. They live that way from the time they're born to the time they die, in filth. How much more sanitary or, practical can you be?
I one last question for me, then I
So
show them
this is,
Madison, because then
I
I
would
have to go. Unfortunately, I have a thing, but Joey's going to continue the thing. How far is Miller willing to take this? Let's say he loses here. Can he appeal? Like, does he have the funds to appeal? And would he take it all the way to the Supreme Court if he can find funding, or do you think that may be an issue?
Um, Personally, I think that there's enough support behind it that Amos is going to be okay. I'm not really sure how much money they've raised, but I'm pretty sure it's a pretty substantial amount. I think that a lot of people see this, people who are, customers of Amos, the people within the Amish community are all seeing this. And as they've said they're going to take it as far as they can. So as long as, the next court will take it up, I think it'll, go all the way to the top, and, you know hopefully the judgment comes out right. Hopefully it doesn't
Okay,
have to
yeah.
go that long.
Yeah, well, look, this is where, even though I'm skeptical of our government growing more and more, I think we still have to leave it up to the courts, and hopefully it's a fair trial and
Absolutely.
stuff. Let me share this quote that Joey wanted me to put up, but I think it's a powerful quote that says, I have ever regarded the freedom of religious opinions and worship as equally belonging to every sect. Joey, why did you like this quote, and how does it come into this topic?
Well, yeah, because I think it comes here is because the Amish are like the quintessential religious minority, right? And not only are they the quintessential religious minority in numbers, as Ellis was alluding to before, they don't even exert themselves typically politically, right? And so the rest of us, right, even if, Gio and I, we belong to a minority denomination as well, but we don't have the same view about not voting and not. So in other words, so we'll speak up on our behalf, right? As is our right as Americans. But the Amish don't even exert that right often, and you guys are encouraging him to, and I think that's good. But that's all the more reason why I think we should be even more vocal, right? They're not going to come on a podcast to tell their plight, but
Yeah.
we can do it for them. And so, like I said, I think, oh, sorry, I just got distracted by
Mhm.
something. But yeah, no, I think, listen, this is something that's part of our political culture in America, right? James Madison, right? Main author of the Constitution. And religious freedom is why people came to this country. And frankly, some of the people who came to this country, a lot of them were Anabaptists, right? Which is where the Amish come out of. And so, listen, there's nothing more American than standing up for the right of some Baptist farmers to live out their lifestyle.
Amen, amen. And that is what the tenet of this show is all about, is protecting everybody's right to liberty of conscience. Obviously, that doesn't mean we're going to protect your right to want to murder somebody. But on issues like this, we are definitely going to do our homework, look at both sides of the issue. The government is a voice, but we, the people, are the conscience, right? The government doesn't have a conscience. All they have is the power of the sword and more lobby interests. And sometimes they abuse that power on minority groups like this. And so we, on the Jew and Joey show and other shows, have to be always vigilant and diligent about protecting the ones with the smaller voices or the ones who can't speak up for themselves. I have to step out here in a little bit, but I do want to share one more quote that Joey sent me, and let's see what your thoughts are on it. It says, "Religion and good morals are the only solid foundation of public liberty and happiness." Alice, what would you say to somebody who is an atheist? And we read him that quote.
You know, I think it's their right as an American to believe whatever they want to believe, as long as they're not infringing on somebody else. I would encourage them to, maybe educate themselves a little bit and, hopefully find their way to God. But it's not my place to tell them what they can believe or what they can't believe. And, that's their right. And I wouldn't necessarily agree with it, but I wouldn't want them to be persecuted for not believing in God either.
Yes,
Amen.
yes. Go ahead,
But
Joey.
so I was just going to say, so the reason why I want to bring that quote up, though, is because, and actually Andrew Clavin talks about this in his book, The Truth and Beauty, but he says one of the things, it's the paradox of a free society, is that in order to maintain a free society, we need a virtuous people, but the moment you enforce it, it ceases to be virtue. And so how we've typically maintained that balance in America is by the fact that we have a freedom of religion, right? In other words, right, we were founded as a country without a king and a nation without a king and a church without a pope, right? So in other words, it was the private religion that was free to exercise in this country that instilled the values in the populace that was necessary for freedom. And so that's another reason, again, why this story made me think of that, is because these are people, right? Again, a religious people who are making a case. Now, I may not completely agree with that case. Like, I think it's okay to use tractors and technology and all those things. But here's the thing:
Bathrooms.
them living out their conviction helps society, because we can look at them. We can look at these people of conviction and say, maybe there's another way to live. Maybe there's something. And that's how the church, that is the power that the church has typically held in America, right? It's the power of, of molding consciences. And so that's why it's so important for the church to remain free. And that's why I think, right, that's again, the cynical part of me is thinks that the state in this situation is going to jump at the opportunity to come down on a religious group, right? So in other words, yeah, they've got some secular reason for doing so, but I'm sure they're like in these government bureaucrats, it doesn't pain them at all that the fact that the people they're doing it to are a religious minority. And so that's just part of the reason why that quote came to mind.
And
But
and
one
again,
other
it's not just their, oh God.
No, no, go
no,
ahead,
no,
Alice. You're the
I was
guest.
gonna say
Go ahead.
it's their
Ah,
how they
but he just
provide
froze.
food. It's everything.
Hey,
It's
start all over because you froze for a bit. Go ahead.
okay. Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So kind of going back to what Joey says, it's, they may be coming down on the food, but it's how that the food is how they pay their bills. So how can they maintain their way of life if they aren't able to put literal food on the table, or, they don't believe in electricity and whatnot, but, they still have expenses they have to pay. They were having to pay double to have their meat transported to the USDA facility, waiting twice as long before it got shipped back to them. What were they supposed to do in the meantime? Starve, not sell anything to their community or, their customers? So, they did what they had to do in order to make it through the hard times. And then now the government is coming down on them saying, oh, well, we may have made an exception because of COVID, but now it's a health emergency. Now you can't be doing it because it's not safe for people. And, it really just doesn't add up.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And look, like I said, I'm going to have to look more into this because I want to look at both sides of it. Being plant based, I really don't know anything about raw milk and all that stuff. I don't drink regular milk. I don't eat meat and none of that. But I do care about the plight of minorities. Whether in this, whether any religious minority, in this case being Amish. I lived in Pennsylvania for over a year. I lived in Allentown, and so, I've seen Amish communities and stuff like that. And so, and like Joey alluded to, I belong to a minority religion as well, and we have a big religious liberty department. I actually shot it out. Sent a text message to somebody I know that they haven't gotten back to me. I would have loved to hear their opinion on this. But nevertheless, we have to stick together and make sure that whatever court case takes place, that it is fair and not just, ramrodded through just to exercise the power of the state. There's one more quote that Joey had from John Adams. Joey, go ahead, read it and tell us why you wanted this in light of the topic.
Yeah, so this is a kind of a clarion call to Christians, any Christians watching or that see this episode. It says, "Let the pulpit resound with the doctrine and sentiments of religious liberty. Let us hear of the dignity of man's nature and the noble rank he holds among the works of God. Let it be known that British liberties, right? We're an Anglo-sphere country. British liberties are not the grants of princes and parliaments." So that again, that just goes. This is part of our political culture. This is who we are as Americans, right? Religious liberty is our first freedom, and I guess kind of my last comment on this on the story is the religious liberty aspect. I think is always the most important, but there's also something to a self-reliant people, a people who can farm or can have are in a local community that can farm. There are people that aren't as reliant on government sources. They're not as reliant on welfare. They're not as reliant on shipping lanes, right? They're just and so a self-reliant people is a free people, and that's the other aspect of this, right? Besides the religion, it's cracking down on these farmers. And I was just watching recently an episode of Joe Rogan's podcast that he did with Steve Rinella. Well, and those laws across the country right now cracking down on hunters in the name of going after trophy hunters, but they broaden that out and it's just going after hunters. It's going after anyone who has the skills and the abilities to live free, to live self-reliantly. And so maybe we'll do a whole episode on the fight against hunters. But yeah,
Yeah,
anything that's
once again, as a person who doesn't eat meat, once again, I would stand with the hunters because you know, the curtailing of religious liberty never comes in big chunks. It comes as they nip away at the fringes little by little to finally you get to the point where there is no liberty left. And so hunting is as natural as can be. Yes, I'm not a big fan of big game trophy hunting, but Americans in the United States themselves aren't really into that. If they're into that, they go over to Africa, try to get a lion or some tusk. Here, they do it for meat. They want that. They want that deer meat.
Yeah.
Alice, your thoughts on that?
I would say in Pennsylvania, you can shoot a deer and butcher it yourself, and as long as you tag it, you can eat that meat. How is that any different? You're killing a wild animal. You don't know what that animal's been eating. The meat that's on Amos's farm is fed, by them. It eats the grass on their land. You know, that's really what doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense that somebody I could go outside and kill a rabbit right now and eat it, but I can't buy, meat that was grown by a farmer. That's just, and I would also, I'm not a big hunter either, but I would be out there right alongside them because, first it starts with hunting and then it's gun rights. And then, like you said, it's the chiseling away of, one freedom that leads to the chiseling away of another freedom and another freedom. And, we just have to stop it before it gets that bad because, you know, once one domino falls, the rest are, bound to fall.
Alice, I have to run. Joey and you are going to finish the show, but I'm glad to meet you. I love the way you
Yeah, absolutely.
articulate your opinion. Would love to have you back on the show, and I'll leave you two to wrap up. Take care.
Thanks, Gio.
1 second here. Let me put them on the screen. There you go.
Yeah. So I guess in closing, what would you say? So for anybody watching that wants to get involved, say in defending in this specific case with Amos, right? In voter drives, I know you do a lot of that. Like, what would you say? How can
Say,
I think you're muted.
please get involved. You kind of cut it out at the end.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was just going to say, what would you say for anybody who wants to get involved, either standing up for Amos, for the voter drives, any of those things? How can they do that?
So if you want to get involved in registering people to vote, you can DM me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is
I was going to
eduke15.
say, what would you say for
Um,
anybody who wants to get involved, either standing up for Amos, oh, or the voter drives, any of those things? How can they do that?
am I frozen? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I've got an echo.
Yeah, that's
I'm,
weird.
I'm wonder if it's something about Geo leaving. But anyway,
So
go ahead.
Okay, so with the Amos thing, I will find out when the next hearing is announced, and we can maybe broadcast that through the comment section in the notes. If you want to get involved with registering people to vote, we would love the help. I work mostly in Pennsylvania, but we've had gun shows all over the country. We've done Amish markets all over Pennsylvania. I'm actually going to go to Erie, Pennsylvania for the solar eclipse on April 8th, April 7th and 8th. There's going to be over 250,000 people there. I would just really implore anybody that, feels like they've ever had the desire to, want to get involved, whether it's at your church, just registering people who, you worship with to vote. Doesn't have to be partisan. You don't have to say, do you want to register as, whatever party, just reaching out to people and building that sense of community is really important. So if you want to get involved, you can certainly reach out to me, reach out to Scott Pressler. Really find somebody that you want to be like, reach out to that person. I think more often than not they'll get back to you.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's what this country is founded on, right? Just normal people taking the reins, right? We don't listen to some, bureaucrats in DC or Harrisburg or Annapolis. I know you're in Maryland, right? That's your capital, right? I could be wrong.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. So, but we don't listen to just some bureaucrats in a capital, right? We're a free people, and we make our voices heard, and we stand up for our fellow citizens. So, in closing, I'm going to give you the last word, and then I'll just tell everybody, please like and subscribe this video. Please share it. Stand up for Amos, and then again, give you the last word real quick.
Yeah, I forgot to say while Gio was here, you will also find that in the Amish community, autism is nearly non-existent. So I'm not claiming that's from the food or, whatever, but, it's a closed society. They have very, very little, it's a lot of the chronic diseases that the rest of the country has, they don't really suffer from. So if that tells you anything, maybe think about living a little bit more simple life. That's pretty much it. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thanks for joining. So I'm gonna have Gio's wife close it down, but we can just both press the hang up button on the bottom. And thanks for coming. And until next week, that's a Gio and Jerry show.
Thanks, Joey.